right. Let's get some people in here first.
Oh, yeah.
All right.
I feel like the Nets sneak just came together so they could all come off the bench at different points in the year.
I respect it.
Just on the lowest of keys. That's my thought.
How did Harden look? I'm looking at the box score right now.
I'm just going to guess like James Harden, but, you know.
I see.
Oh, no, he's chilling.
I thought you would have caught that one live.
Nah, 6 assists in 14 minutes.
Okay. Figured you're going to be watching for some Blake propaganda.
Nah, I've proven my point in that area.
Okay. All right.
Hi, hello. Script layout, and like I was so confused because I'm like, why are we talking about Oladipo? I didn't realize he hadn't had surgery already. I kind of forgot.
Yeah, wow. They got it announced earlier this afternoon.
Yeah, I had forgotten about that. That's wild.
All right, everybody good?
Yeah, I think so.
All right. Hi, hello, and welcome to another episode of the Dunker Spot. We are underneath the Basketball News Podcast umbrella. I am your host, Nikias Duncan. Joining me, as always, is my co-host, Steve Jones Jr. How are you, sir?
Good day, y'all. Good day. I'm doing great. How y'all doing?
Doing pretty well, and we have a special guest. We have Sports Illustrated's Chris Herring, one of the smartest men in the business, one of the nicest men in the business. Glad to have you with us, sir. How are you?
I'm good. I appreciate the compliment. I don't know that I agree with it, but I appreciate you, man. Thank you.
Why would you not agree with it?
Because I feel like I can't put one foot in front of the other lately, and I think it's more than a lately sort of thing, but I appreciate you.
That's because you have like 12 different things going on. How has this season been for you?
I'm so ready for it to be over. As much of a basketball fan as I am, it's been such a weird season. You know, I ride hard for, the league and enjoying the league generally. Every now and then you catch a game that is just a fantastic game. But at the same time, I wrote about this a couple weeks ago, that the second half of the season has been really uneven. Have been a lot of guys out. There have been a lot of teams pretty blatantly tanking. You're seeing 57-point blowouts. As I wrote in that story, you've seen basically more 20-point blowouts than any post All-Star break. I think it was going back 53 years, but aside from that one time, it would be the highest in history. So it's just, I think we've kind of reached a point where the play-in will be cool, and it'll be different. And so that's keeping my attention. But if it weren't for that, I would have been ready for the playoffs. And I think generally speaking, we always get to this point in the season where it's like teams going through the motions, Popovich rolling out lineups where, all five stars are just sitting there basically watching the DVD on the sideline, in past years. Like, it's that sort of feel. It would be that sort of feel if it weren't for the plan. And so I'm kind of just ready to get there with that. And like I was saying, this is my own thing, so it's not the league's problem, but because we didn't have a real off season last year, it just feels like it's all run together. And I think for me, even more so just with trying to work on a book and moving into a new job, it would just be nice to exhale. And I don't think the league has given us much opportunity to do that. When we thought we were going to have an opportunity to do it, they're like, no, all-star game. So it'll be nice to have like a chance to exhale for real, in my opinion. But I don't push that on anybody, but I think it would just be nice to have a little bit of downtime.
Well, I feel you there. That break that usually happens wasn't around, like you said. How do you view kind of the compacted second half of the season? Do you feel like that's had an impact, or is this just overall fatigue? Because we all get fatigued at some point with the game, no matter how much we love it.
Right. I've seen a lot of people, and it's been a story, how much are the injuries because of the weird season? And, I think that question comes up a lot. Every time there's like a big name player that goes down. I saw people making the argument with Jaylen Brown, and it's like, okay, but I don't think a wrist injury is, like it'd be different if we're talking about like someone blows an ACL or, like Jamal Murray. But, there's no indication that numbers wise, there's anything different with how many guys have gotten hurt. What I do think is worth paying attention to and maybe worth somebody looking into is like which teams are really struggling with it. I think it's interesting that the Lakers, to some extent, the Celtics, the Nuggets have had issues with the stuff, and those were some of the last teams left standing. So I think that they're, for teams that only get a 2-month break, it wouldn't be that shocking if guys were really struggling to kind of get right. And I think that's worth looking into. More or less, I think every season has its really ugly, horrible injuries, and I kind of think this is just one of them. But I do think the unevenness of the scores and stuff like that is a product of just a weird season. You got a lot of guys that are just out there that are young, that never had a chance to be in a training camp. You have a lot of guys that are out there on two ways that they just need to fill in because of the COVID protocol. So it's just been really lopsided and really weird. I think the league would admit that. And to me, that should be incentive to, like, no matter what, get back to normal with regards to the normal league schedule, because I haven't enjoyed how uneven it's been. And like I said, if it weren't for the play-in, I normally stay away from the idea of the ratings talk. I think people use it as a really weird sort of talking point for all sorts of reasons that I don't agree with. But I do think that, this is one of those things that could kind of tip the scale with some of the rating stuff when you've got teams that are just getting massacred by 40, 50, almost 60 points sometimes.
No, yeah, good stuff. I mean, you could tell sometimes when a team just doesn't have it, and that team ends up losing by 20, they look good the next time they play. So that probably speaks to that unevenness.
You mentioned a little earlier that you were trying to navigate this long season with your coverage and also your book. You want to tell the people a little bit about your book?
Sure. I appreciate you asking. So I'm trying to be done with this mug, man. I'm so ready to be done with it. I got a really nice call this morning from my book editor, who I thought he had a real issue with something. He's like, "Hey, when you've got a second, let me know. Let's talk." And normally he doesn't leave me that in the dark about stuff, so I didn't know what he was referring to. But he was calling to tell me that he was talking with one of his bosses, and they wanted to go ahead and kind of put everything in stone as far as a release date for it. So it'll be out January 18th of next year. It's essentially done. Me and my editor had a long talk about, we basically went through a Google Doc of mine earlier in the week on Monday, of every detail or anecdote or story that I have that isn't in the book as of right now, and all the best ones I have that aren't in the book. And he kind of wanted to hear them to make sure that I'm not leaving out some holy grail sort of detail that, that people would talk about till the end of time if it's, if they realized that it was there. So we went through it. There were maybe 5 or 6 things that he'd like me to work in. There's one that was a huge weird story that I think I've mentioned once. I think I was on a clubhouse or a locker room, and someone was like, "Tell me the coolest detail you're going to have that you aren't going to have in the book because you don't have space or for whatever reason it doesn't work." And this long roundabout story, I'll try to tell it in about 30 seconds. Anthony Mason, the Knicks wanted him to kind of be the player that they featured at their inaugural teenagers camp sort of thing at their team facility. This is 1992. The superstars are never the guys that are at those camps because they are living their life. You normally pick a guy that's kind of up and coming, but relevant enough to where the fans really get to enjoy being in their presence. So Mason was kind of that guy in 1992. He was coming off the bench. The Knicks had agreed to give him $1,200 to show up. They got him a limo to go pick him up to come to the camp. He shows up. It's almost like one of those Hollywood Boulevard sorts of things where he walks up. It's almost like a red carpet. The kids are all watching and, shouting, and they're excited. But Mason rolls down his window, but he refuses to get out of the limo. And, the people from the team are like, "Why aren't you getting out?" The kids are starting to wonder whether you're coming in. He's like, "I'm not coming in." They're like, "What do you mean you're not coming in? You agreed to this. We're paying you $1,200 for it. You're in our limo." And he's like, "Okay, so I'll come in, but you've got to make it $2,000, not $1,200. And I want it in cash, and I want it today." And they were like, "Okay, what?" So you're going to hold us hostage now with these kids standing here. He was like, yep. So, this is like 1992. Like ATM machines were not nearly as prevalent as they are now. I don't even think you get $2,000 out of an ATM machine today. Like, I don't think you get that at one time. So anyway, the team, the administrator who he was talking to, a guy named Ed Tapscott that became the GM later, he somehow found a way to get dude his cash so Mason would at least get out of the car. He walks in, he's playing like a scrimmage with the kids. He didn't know how to like turn it on and off. He ended up inadvertently like busting a kid in the nose and basically breaking a kid's nose. The kid was knocked out cold. The kid like came to and woke up, and Mason's standing over him to make sure he's good, bleeding all over his shirt. Kid wakes up with a big ass smile on his face because he sees Mason hovering over him. He's like excited, and he asks Mason to sign his bloody t-shirt. Mason agrees to do it. But then after it's all over, they hand him his cash, and he's like, all right, thank you. And oh, by the way, when the limo takes me home, I'm going to have the limo driver drive my mom to the mall. That was what I wanted the extra money for. And end story. That other than the GM getting mad at Mason for running up the limo bill and taking extra cash, and then Mason getting mad at the team administrator that he told he needed extra money from, and being mad that he ratted him out to Ernie Grunfeld, the GM, even though obviously the invoice came in like 3 times more expensive than it should have because of all the joyrides that he had his mom take on. So it was just like a weird roundabout story. It's such a weird story, but like such an enlightening story about him. I couldn't find a natural way to get it in the book, but my editor's like, you've got to find a way. So that'll be my project this weekend of trying to find a place to kind of plug that. I have a whole chapter on Mason and all the other key players from that era.
I will say I was already excited for the book. The name of the book is Blood on the Hardwood, The Flagrant History of the 1990s New York Knicks. I'm already excited for the book, but like if that's a story that missed the cut,
yeah,
I can only imagine what kind of anecdotes are going to actually be in the book.
I forget too with you and the Heat connection, man. I mean, there's so much stuff about Riley. Like, do I think anything's going to be in there where people are like, oh, F this dude? Not necessarily, but there's going to be some stuff in there. Well, I mean, there probably will be from some Knicks fans because of how he left and some details on that. But there's some stuff like, I'll just say the Game 7 details that I've got on him with regards to him leaving Starkson the day he shot 2 for 18 in Game 7. Like, some of the decision-making that went into that potentially and why he didn't pull Starks, some of the stuff I've gotten on that like has never been out there and will probably like royally piss Knicks fans off and potentially make a lot of them rethink the way that Riley coached the team. But really, really fun process. I talked to a couple hundred people for it. A lot of whom, and I think what's coolest about it is like, I don't know if it's most, but certainly half of them had never talked to reporters before because I was talking to secretaries and marketing people and season ticket people that, worked for the team behind the scenes, but weren't being quoted regularly and weren't in the media or anything. So it's not just Ewing and Riley and the people that always were dealing with the media. These are people that like didn't trust me because they're like, I don't know who you are. Why do you want to talk to me? I didn't know anything. And then you talk to them and you realize they knew everything. And so it's really, really cool from that standpoint. I'm hoping it'll shed light on a lot. I'm hoping it'll be entertaining. It was fun to kind of get outside of my, numbers-based sort of writing that I've gotten to be known for. But anyway, I appreciate you giving me a chance to talk about it a little bit. Thank you.
Oh, no problem. No problem. Just one more quick thing before we move forward with the awards talk, which is what we are here for tonight. You are based in Chicago. The Chicago Sky are in Chicago. Candace Parker is also in Chicago. How excited are you about that team this year?
So I haven't bought tickets yet. I'm going to. I already have in the past, so it's not even an issue. But I live very close by to their arena, and as a matter of fact, I'm moving even closer in the next month or two into a condo that'll be even closer to the arena. I don't know if it's quite walking distance, but if it's not, it's it's like a 5-minute car ride, 10-minute car ride. So yeah, for me, I've been real. I haven't gone to any games in person from a coverage standpoint this year, which has been kind of intentional. I'm vaccinated now, which is cool. But yeah, I'm going to be there at some point. I don't know how many games I'll be at. I don't know if I'll buy season tickets. It kind of feels like maybe I'm as excited as I am. I don't know that I'm going to try to be anywhere completely regularly right now. Just I feel like it's still need to just kind of chill. Everybody probably does, but yeah, I was hyped. I saw the rumors about it before it was happening, before it was official, and I've seen a lot of WNBA scoops kind of go by the wayside, and they're not, they don't actually happen. So I was trying not to get my hopes up, but it did happen, and I was like, oh wow. And it was already fun to root for them. They already kind of seemed to be headed in the right direction. I will say though, the Gabby Williams thing is rough, because she was my favorite player on the squad before anyway. I always have a tendency to like kind of well-rounded players, and I kind of like underdogs, ones that like don't excel at any one thing necessarily, but like are good at a lot of things, or maybe they excel at one thing but not everything. Like it's one of the reasons I've always really loved Drew Holiday, for instance. But man, like I was bummed, and I kept hoping that like there was just smoke and no fire with regards to the stuff about her wanting out, or the stuff about the suspension, which seemed really weird. And that's probably my one frustration. And I guess I'm a reporter, so I can't complain about it too much. But when you see stuff and there's like a little bit of smoke to it and probably some fire, and I kind of feel like you have the Wojs of the world with regards to the NBA and the Mark Steins and what have you. Whenever there's like kind of pseudo scandalous stuff in the WNBA, I kind of feel like, in part because people are still trying to build the league up, the reporting's not generally as aggressive, and I kind of feel like you only find out about stuff after the fact instead of the build-up. So if it's something with Derek Fisher, or the Sparks or something like that, I kind of feel like we figure out after, and Ramona Shelburne will have like a big piece after it's very clear something weird happened, but not before. And I think it doesn't kill the drama of the league, but I think it's not quite as dramatic as it could be. And, I think we afford more benefit of the doubt to not just make them look messy. And I kind of want it to be equal opportunity messiness with the WNBA at some point. But anyway.
I feel that. All right, let's move forward. I want to go through all the awards with you. We'll be quick with the ones at the top. I feel like we're going to be in lockstep with a few of these, but I am interested to pick your brain on some of these. We'll kick things off with Coach of the Year. Chris, I'll start with you. Who's your winner, and then the second and third place guys for you right now?
Okay. I'm going to go with Thibodeau here, which probably isn't surprising. I mean, I think you could go at least two ways with this. I think he was probably one of the obvious ones you could put at the top. I know that on some level, this is kind of like if you pictured what a Thibodeau coach team were to look like if they were going to be decent, this is what you would expect. The sort of effort they show, a team that can be hit or miss with offense, a team that sometimes, it's like just kind of go get us a basket with Julius Randle. Still, we didn't expect any of this from them. The odds at the beginning of the season, the talk of which teams we expected to be in the playoffs, the improvement that we would see from Randle, which he was easily one of my least favorite players to watch last year. I don't know that he's my favorite now because I still think some of the playing style stuff is similar. But, I mean, that dude is a completely different player. And how much of that Thibodeau deserves credit for, I'm not sure. But when half the team is kind of putting up the numbers they are, and Derrick Rose looks the way he does, and like all the jokes we get off about how Thibodeau is just coaching his third or fourth version of the Bulls with all the Bulls players he has, at some point you have to give credit for something like that. And so I'm going to give him credit for that. Right behind him, though, I would put Monty Williams. I think as hard as it is to take a team out of the gutter and to get them into the playoffs as like a middle of the pack seed, I think it's probably just as difficult, if not more so sometimes, to take a team that hasn't been in the playoffs and have them in contention for a number one seed, particularly in the West. I'm a big fan of Monty Williams. Another guy that I talked to a lot of people about when I was working on the Knicks book because of his 1 year with the Knicks. But that team, so much of the credit is given to Chris Paul, and I think it goes a little bit deeper than that. I was talking to him just yesterday about Cam Payne, who was a guy that, another person where he was kind of like the player version of the Knicks, where it's like this dude is in the gutter and all of a sudden he's relevant. And I don't know how or why that happened or when that happened. I have a story about him tomorrow that will go up. But, I mean, little things like that. It's a team that, they were supposed to be on the rise anyway, but not to this extent, in my opinion. So he'd be my number 2. I kind of had a tie for number 3. Like, I had a weird choice for number 3. I don't know which one of them I'd put at the top. Snyder, I think, is one other guy that deserves to be in that conversation. But the other person I would have that is kind of a weird pick, but I kind of like it. Maybe I'm just trying to be cute. Nate McMillan. I think that Atlanta looked real weird. I know their fans were really frustrated with Lloyd Pierce. And the dude just keeps winning everywhere. I mean, granted, we can knock his playoff track record all day long, and maybe fairly so, maybe not. I'm not sure. But this Hawks team was kind of weird. I thought they were weird an offseason with everything they did, like how quickly they built everything up, if you can even call it building. I would kind of expect the roof to cave in if anyone built my house that way, with how quickly you built something like that. But he just lets guys play. It's the weird thing. I've never quite had him right at the top of my Coach of the Year thing, because sometimes it's kind of hard to identify exactly what he's changing. I think I've always described him as kind of more of a laissez-faire sort of coach. But still, when you consistently win more games than you're kind of expected to, and I think even when I was at 538, I tweeted once and I put in a story once that I think was he there in Indiana 4 years? I think each of the 4 years he was there, Indiana won at least 5 more games than they were expected to in our preseason projection model, and they were the only team like that. And it was that way for 4 straight years. And I'm pretty sure, just if I had to eyeball it with Atlanta, the second half that he's taken over, I'm pretty sure he's probably accomplished that in half a season now. So I would put him on that list. And I kind of, I get why Snyder will be at the top of that conversation for a lot of people, but I think McMillan probably deserves some recognition too.
Got you. Steve, who would you have?
You picked the wrong guy for a quick hitter on this award. Because I had about 12 guys.
Wow.
I'm going to shout some of them out before I get to my list. Build the intrigue for you, Nikias.
Let's go.
Shout out to Pop. Changed a whole lot to get his team doing well. Shout out to him. Shout out to Scott Brooks. You remember what the Wizards looked like a few months ago? Kind of crazy. Shout out to Rick Carlisle. Dallas looked like they were in the mud. They turned things around. Shout out to Terry Stotts for everyone calling for his job and people saying he was going to be out, and they're still moving forward. James Borrego in Charlotte. Hell of a job he's done to get that culture built.
This feels like a DJ Khaled feature at this point.
It is. We the best.
Another one.
I got Doc, I got Ty Lue, I got Spo, I got Steve Nash, but here we go. Mike Malone.
Okay.
He's done a hell of a job. He should get more credit for what he's done with that Denver team with those injuries. But my 3 are Monty Williams at the top, just because of the turnaround for Phoenix, the buy-in that he's gotten from the bubble to this season, getting them to play on both ends, getting growth from Ayton, Payne, Mikal Bridges, getting the lineups right. Tibbs is number 2 for me, just because the biggest compliment I could give that Knicks team at the start of this season was this looks like a Tibbs team, but it's modern-ish. To get that team to buy in and compete every single night. They have an identity. They know who they are. Offensively, they may not be able to get the same kind of buckets you can, but they're going to find a way to score, and they're going to fight you on the other end. And then I do have Quinn Snyder 3rd. There was a point in the season where Quinn Snyder walked into a huddle with Utah and threw his clipboard on the bench and walked away. And now they're the number 1 seed in the West. And they've been excellent all season. They found a style. They've continued to play that style despite injuries, despite teams figuring out. I've been impressed by that consistency, so he gets number 3 for me. But Nate McMillan, that was tough to leave him off.
All right. Did you want to throw in any more coaches before I go?
No.
Y'all's chemistry is hilarious to me. It always will be.
Oh, man. Okay, so full disclosure, Steve and I have the same top 3. I have Monty 1, I have Tibbs 2, and I have Quinn Snyder 3. If there's an honorable mention I want to throw out there, I think Taylor Jenkins in Memphis should get at least some sort of shout.
For what?
I mean, they've had Jaren Jackson for like 12 minutes.
Yeah.
Like Ja missed some time. What are we doing here? I'm being slandered for a Memphis take.
No.
So I don't disagree with you at all. It's weird though. Like I struggle a little bit with how to, like, even as Steve was mentioning teams like or coaches like Scott Brooks and teams that struggled out of the gate that then turned it around at the end of the year. I don't know how much credit to give. It's kind of the way, and I know we'll get to this later, but like it's kind of the way I struggle with guys that have really rough, like an Anthony Edwards type season, where you struggle really hard and then you rebound really aggressively too. Like I don't know if that deserves as much or more credit as someone who's like more consistent all the way through. And that said, with Taylor Jenkins, man, absolutely, like record-wise, they've been more solid than I expected them to be, which I kind of feel like that's one of the main things you consider. You look at the youth of the team he's coaching. There were so many games I watched them just kind of scuttle down at the end, which young teams do that. So I get it, but I also would probably struggle with like having him right at the top of my conversation with that, because there were so many of them. I feel like Grayson Allen alone had like 4 games in a row where it's like, dog. And I'm joking here, but like point shaving type stuff. Like it was bad. They were bad mistakes. And he's young, and that team is young. And it's fascinating because I tend to forget. It's one of the things that I think I kind of lose perspective on a little bit through Zoom, as opposed to in person when you're in a locker room and you're with these guys and you see them up close. I was on a post-game Zoom call with Memphis right after the game where Luka hit that just like devastating 3 to beat them at the buzzer, where like nobody really quite guarded him and he was like kind of falling over as he shot it. And it was really mind-blowing to me because when I'm so used to like covering a Laker post game or anybody, who's like in contention for a title. And I was listening to the questions the reporters were asking, and it kind of reminded me of the way I covered like the high school teams when I was in high school, because you don't like, they're kids in high school. And so like you want them to win. And if they don't win, like it's not the end of the world. And that was very much how it kind of felt, where they were treating it a little bit with kid gloves. And I was like expecting Taylor Jenkins to kind of have this fire and brimstone. And he was like, played a good game, wouldn't change anything. And it's like, okay, so you don't really critique your players through the media. You don't really critique stuff in the media. And the media down there's not really critiquing them because they're young. And so that was like, it's weird. Like I think we could go in on them a little bit more, but if I can't go in on them, then I'm going to go in on Taylor Jenkins a little bit. And just enough to maybe not have him in that conversation for me personally.
Got you. I mean, to be fair, like I think Taylor Jenkins has done a good job, but also Steve took like 6 of the honorable mentions that I was going to have, so I had to throw out somebody. so I think he deserves at least a little bit of shout out for the job he's done.
Name one.
Name one of the coaches that you mentioned.
No, that you was going to mention.
I was going to throw Ty Lue out there.
Oh, my bad.
But you got him. It's fine. It's fine.
Hey, Ty boo me. All right, I'm sorry.
There it is. There's the first one. Okay, let's move on to most improved. Steve, who do you have is your top 3 for most improved right now?
I'm going to go from bottom to top. Michael Porter Jr. is my number 3.
Okay.
Just for the way that he improved on both ends of the floor, became a more complete player. Jeremy Grant is still number 2 for me because I did not know he could do that, and he did that pretty well as far as scoring the ball. I thought he was firmly in the 3-and-D category, and I was incorrect. So I'm going to put him number 2. And then Julius Randle is my most improved player. Just as far as the growth, the consistency with the shot, making threes, hitting step-back threes, pull-up threes, them running plays for him for threes. Despite double teams, still be able to score and make plays, making the right reads, making the right passes, buying in defensively. He's going to get the nod from me.
All right, Chris, who do you have?
I like that Porter pick. Like I probably would have considered that more. I think I have a personal rule where I don't pick guys that are still within like their first couple of years. I mean, all of these guys are within their first couple of years, but like, especially because he didn't get all of last year. But man, like I've kind of want to do a story. I probably won't do it. So even if I was going to now, I've just blown myself up. I can't think of anybody who's improved as quickly and like become competent defensively as quickly as he has in my mind. Because I remember, I mean, there were so many tweets last year and so many videos of just like, it felt kind of just like you could make like Shaqtin a full segments out of his defensive rotations and just use him like the way they did with JaVale. They were bad. And now it's like that dude is making impactful plays at the rim and elsewhere multiple times throughout a game. And I think, people that don't watch Denver are a little bit behind just in terms of the way they talk about them defensively, certainly Jokic and, him being at least competent defensively in a way that people don't give him credit for. But Porter is the same way. And so I kind of like that pick for most improved. Mine would be Grant, who I will be honest, for the first couple months, I didn't think there's any way anyone could knock him from the top of that conversation. I thought he was going to win running away. But also what goes up generally comes down, and that dude started red hot. And, there should have been indications, like Steve said. I didn't think he could do that, and I think there was some of that where it's like he probably can't do it to that extent, at least not this quickly. And so he'd be my number 3. I had Christian Wood at number 2. A guy that, it's kind of funny. It's like, they talk about how Hinkie died so that, so the Sixers could run or, the replacement could run. Maybe Christian Wood had to kind of die a death in Detroit so that, Jeremy Grant and these other guys could get opportunities. The thinking on that, like I have people that I'm friendly with over in Detroit, and we've talked a lot about kind of why they let him walk. I understand it, and maturity stuff and stuff like that. But yeah, I mean, he had the kind of season where it's like, I think they would probably like a mulligan on that to some extent, even if it's just to try to figure out what value he has and figure out something later if you're not sure he can really lead your locker room. So there's that. Great season from him when he was healthy and just a massive difference in terms of how Houston looked when he was able to play. And Randall, I think, I guess I would hear out arguments if he's not the guy for that award, but I would really like to hear the argument if he's not the guy.
Yeah, I think Randall's number 1 for me. Like, I just did not expect this level of shot making at all. Like, for him to go from being like a 27 or 28% 3-point shooter or whatever it is, and now he's knocking down threes off the bounce on purpose is absurd to me. So he'd be 1. Jeremy Grant would be 2 for me. 3 was Jaylen Brown. Thinks that he's out with the wrist injury, but just the improvement he made as a shot creator and as a shot maker, like I think that helped loosen up some things, gave Boston another pull-up threat alongside Jason Tatum. Takes a little bit of pressure off of Kemba Walker to not have to be that guy since Jaylen can self-create. And he's also comfortable just working off balls with those other 2 guys dominate. So I like the way he kind of filled out the roles there. But quick honorable mention, since he's only going to end up playing 35, 40 games somewhere in there. I was really impressed with what I saw from DeAndre Hunter earlier this year. Did not expect him to take the kind of leap that he did as a shot creator. Atlanta was giving him pick and roll reps on purpose, and he looked pretty darn comfortable with it. The defense was also there. Just thinks that he got hurt during the middle of the year, and now he's still in the midst of working himself back. But that was a guy that I liked. He probably would have been in my top 3 had he continued to play and kept up that level. But I think we're pretty much in lockstep between Randall and Grant in the top 2. Like, they just a fantastic season from all of them.
I like those picks for sure. Hunter, man, I'm working on a big feature about the Hawks right now, and I'm so interested just to kind of see what they're like closer to being whole with him, and and I'm so excited to kind of see them in the playoffs. I don't have any sense of what to expect. You could tell me anything about what their first 2 rounds will look like, or if you told me that they're going to end up, did they lose tonight? I know we hopped on right, or maybe they're losing right now.
They won.
They won. Okay. So like if they were to end up, let's say if for some reason they were end up 6 and they end up playing someone like Milwaukee, would I expect them to win that? No, of course not. But if they were to like give Milwaukee some trouble, it wouldn't stun me. And I just kind of feel like on some level, I think people are just kind of sleeping on them just a little bit because they don't have experience. But I mean, they can go off offensively, and depending on what you're trying to do against them with your own offense, you could get in real trouble real quickly. Like if stuff isn't falling from outside and you're hoping that Giannis is just going to get to the basket all day long against Capella. I mean, I'm not worried about Milwaukee if they get that matchup, but they could make stuff a lot more interesting. And I think in a series against the Knicks, they obviously could win that series if they play that. I could see either team winning the series, but they could have a really interesting run. I'm really, I don't know. I said it before the season. This is a total aside because it's not an award, but I thought that Atlanta was the most fascinating team in the league since the offseason because of what they did in the offseason and because of any other number of things.
Nah, I mean, they got their guys going right now. You got Trey, you got Bogdanovich playing like this, you got Capella playing at this level with John Collins. I still like Gallinari and Lou Will off the bench in those kind of roles. Like you add Nate, and these are a lot of guys you can use, Solomon Hill, Tony Snell, those kind of guys. Yeah, I can see it.
Tony Snell very quietly having like the best catch and shoot season in the league. It's not something I expected at all. It's very odd. Steve, have you been at all on your Knicks over Hawks take, or are you still rolling with New York in a potential series like that?
I mean, I have to now. I have to.
Ooh.
I've backed myself into a corner because I don't have Miami over New York, so that's the one.
All right, fair enough. We'll rock with it. Let's go to some young guys. Chris, who do you have for Rookie of the Year?
I'll go in reverse order because I feel like it's probably more interesting. I'd be a little surprised if we have different ones here. So I actually struggle with this one because even a month and a half ago, I had said I would have put Halliburton as my Rookie of the Year. That was when I thought LaMelo might miss the rest of the season. And if he had missed the rest of the season and Halliburton had played the rest of the season, I didn't think the gap was so otherworldly to where, LaMelo had outplayed him by so much that he should win the award if he only gets to play 40 games and Halliburton plays all of them. But LaMelo came back. Halliburton missed time, unfortunately with an injury, which seems to kind of be the theme of the season. So Halliburton's my number 3. I went back and forth on whether to have him or Edwards number 2, because again, I'm someone that really struggles when you've kind of got almost like that. I don't know what you call them if there's a name for it in drama where you've got the mask and there's like the sad face and the happy face, but like that's kind of what Anthony Edwards' season was. The sad face was really sad and really rough. I think I can be at least more forgiving about it in a season where there was no training camp for these guys, no real meaningful training camp, haphazard sort of situation where everything was uneven. And I think what puts me over the top for him in terms of being fine with putting him at number 2, and obviously having him on my all rookie team and everything like that. I mean, he was dominant in a way that Halliburton had moments like that. I think even one of the games against the Lakers recently, he had a game where he just was kind of killing them. But I mean, Edwards had games where he was the best player on the floor on a team where he's playing with someone who pretty sure Towns has been an all-star before. I mean, that's in games where even recently, and I know me and Nikai has tweeted about it, where, you've got Russell and Cat running, screen and roll two-man game. And it's like, you're kind of banging the table. Like, why are you not getting the ball to Edwards? Cause dude's got 40 and he's a rookie. So that's really unusual in a way that like, it's very rare that you have rookies that can just go off for 40 and it looks every bit of like, a legitimate sort of thing. It's not fluky. I think he had 4 or 5 games over 30 points. And the efficiency was pretty elite when you talk about rookie stuff. After a certain point, I think someone mentioned like after LaMelo got hurt, it was almost like Edwards decided, well, now's my chance. Statistically, that's almost the way it looked. And so I'm fine giving him the nod for number 2. I don't think it's particularly close between him and LaMelo for number 1. I just think the first half of the season was too rough for him.
Fair enough. Steve, who do you have in your top 3?
No drama here. I have the same 3 in the same order. I think Halliburton was great. Edwards, I'm a sucker for the growth he had. And I think LaMelo was just too good early. But, yeah, I got the same 3. I already know where you stand.
Well, fine. I'll be a little bit different then. I have LaMelo 1. I have Halliburton 2. Just really appreciate the consistency that he played with. I love the growth I saw with him on the ball. as a guy that got to the rim a little bit more than I expected, as a pull-up threat, a lot more fluid as a pull-up shooter than I expected this year. And I think that's just going to lift his ceiling quite a bit moving forward. And I have Edwards. Like, the highs have been incredibly high. Like, I think it's easy to argue that his highs have been higher than any other rookie in the class. His lows were also stark. So it's hard to ignore those lows, because just like he didn't have an off season, neither did Tyrese Halliburton, and he didn't play like that. And neither did Lonzo, and he didn't play like that. So fantastic years from all three guys. I just have Edwards at 3. That's just kind of where I'm at. Steve, did you have something you wanted to add?
Nah. Nah.
I was expecting a shot.
No shot. I'm good.
I agree with you wholeheartedly on Halliburton. Like, watching that dude pass the ball, he's just a fun player, man. Just really a fun player. And one of those guys, just because Sacramento is Sacramento, that you can tell that there's always some of this, depending on who you follow within, different fan bases. There's certain guys I always feel a little bit bad that, just people don't recognize how good they are, who they are even, because they don't play for their team, or they don't play for a team that's good enough to get national attention. And I think Sacramento kind of corners the market on those guys because they have so many individually talented players over the years. Bogdanovich was a great example of that too, where I think obviously the hoop heads kind of knew, oh, wow, Milwaukee might get this dude. That's a game changer potentially. And, and now with the Hawks, kind of what he's doing. And it's, even now, it's the Hawks, so not everybody will notice that either. But, Halliburton kind of feels like he's the next in that line, because you just know people aren't watching the Kings until they're playing against your team. Too many people aren't. And I wish people could see how good he was, because so many people, if you don't have LaMelo right at the top of that conversation, or, if you say that all of a sudden LaMelo being out opens the door for Halliburton, they're like, no, there's no way. And it's like, well, how much have you watched Halliburton? Because there are just so many people that haven't, unfortunately.
He's been so good. Like, he is cliche, but he legit plays like he's been in the league like 5 or 6 years already.
Yeah.
Like, it's ridiculous the kind of field that he has. While we're on rookie talk, let's give our all rookie teams. I would assume that we all have, the top 3 in rookie of the year all on the first team, correct?
Yeah. And then a big gap between those 3 and then the other 2 that are on my first team for sure.
Yes. So I'll start with you, Steve. Who are your other 2 guys on the first team?
Jayshawn Tate, a.k.a. Jayshawn Great. And then Sadiq Bey, a.k.a. Sadiq Trey.
We're dialing up the puns, I see. Chris, who do you have?
Yeah. I'm so glad this is y'all's podcast and not mine, because I couldn't deal with this dude's puns for like another minute. Yeah, I mean, I would have the same exact 2 guys. I really love watching Sadiq Bey play. My friend Vince Goodwill just had a really great story on him a couple of days ago, a Mother's Day story about him and his mom. But I really like watching him play. And Jayshawn Tate is just so much fun to watch. It like really doesn't make sense how someone his size does all the stuff he does, shoots as efficiently as he does from certain parts of the court, from 2-point range. I really, really like him. It was one of the few reasons to kind of watch that team, really.
Well, I feel kind of out of the loop now. I have a different Piston. I also have Jayshawn Tate. I think he's been the best defensive rookie in the class this year. I've enjoyed watching him on that end. I've also enjoyed him flashing some ball skills, allowing him to handle a little bit, make some plays. I have Isaiah Stewart.
Good call. Great call.
I just did not expect him to do anything with the ball. Honestly, like, it's been weird watching him like attack dudes off the dribble and like take threes on purpose. And he's already bringing it as a rebounder on both ends of the floor. A lot more mobile on the perimeter than I expected. So I would give him the shot. Like, also, I want to have some sort of big on the first team. Like, maybe that's just traditional. This is the B. But
this is where you become traditional. They say you can go any position.
They got real but like, this year, though. They got real weird with it.
They said you can do whatever you want. It's a rookie team.
Yeah. But like, he's been good. Like, I don't think that's a hot.
That's a great pick though, because like I actually considered him pretty strongly. I couldn't justify. Oh, not that it matters. Like, you could justify whatever you want. I was gonna say I couldn't justify putting 2 Pistons on the first team, but I mean, you could make the argument that he was the most valuable rookie they had, and I mean, he's leading like a bunch of categories for rookies. Certainly rebounding, but like a bunch of other stuff too. He, like you said, he does so much more than you expect him to offensively, and like looks comfortable and competent doing it. I love Isaiah Stewart. I tweet about that dude all the time.
That's a great pick. He's on my second team, but the growth he's had, he caught my eye because of his energy. He seemed like a big energy guy. I'm a screen. I'm a hit everybody. I'm a rebound, and then that turned into defense. I'm gonna be in position. I'm gonna block shots, and then that turned into, hey, I'm gonna shoot some threes. I'm gonna pick and pop, and then that turned into, hey, I'm gonna shot fake you from the three, drive and finish, and that's a lot of growth from a rookie in 1 year, and that's the kind of linear thing you want to see, which is why I think playing time is one of the bigger pieces of player development.
I see. I'm gonna Euro step past that one. While you're there, go ahead and give us your second team.
Let's see. I had Isaiah Stewart. I had Isaac Okoro, Emmanuel Quickly. I still think he had such a great year as far as offensively playing very well. I have Campazzo, which I'm cheating, but the impact that he had, I mean, he's a rookie, but he's not a rookie. But as far as defending the way that he did, I mean, I think I've seen 7 players want to fight him, and it never bothers him. He's stepping up when Jamal Murray went down. Creating plays, that's been great. And then I have Desmond Bane.
You're going with his real name this time.
Or Desmond Maine, whatever you want to do today.
There it is.
It's right for you, Chris. Right for you. But nah, the way
I keep hoping my internet will go out each time you have one of those puns.
It never does. You got to shoot. But Desmond Bane's ability to hit threes consistently, I didn't know he had all of that. Like I knew he could hit shots, but the drives, the 3-point shot, he's been solid all year. He's been a good piece for Memphis. So he's really impressed this year for me. But that's my second team right there.
I still don't understand how Desmond Bane slipped to the end of the first round. Like, I'm still just mad at Memphis's draft in general because they should not have been in a position to add either of those guys. People overthought it, but that's a rant for another podcast. And Chris, who do you have on your second team?
So I have, not in any particular order, but I've got Quickly, who, Knick fans probably wish they would, if they had to pick a starter between him and Elfrid Payton, if they had to pick a starter between me and Elfrid Payton, they would pick me. But I think really does provide a lot for them, in terms of what his shooting percentage looks like. It's not, I don't think it was great, but he takes such a high percentage of his shots from three that, that he's a pretty efficient player from that standpoint, especially for a rookie. So Quickly, I picked Bane as well. I really enjoy watching him play. He is great from three, particularly for a rookie, but like will put the ball on the floor if you close out on him too hard, and is really good with the floater. Same kind of question you have, where it's like, how did they end up with a dude like this? I took Patrick Williams on my second team as well. Not that this is why I picked him for the team, but I feel like he could be really good. Just as far as size-wise, like he looks like a monster out there for someone that, is a wing. Can handle the ball a little bit. Every now and then will surprise you with like a really gorgeous pass. So I had him on my second team. Isaiah Stewart as well, and then I had Okoro, who ended up playing a much bigger role for obviously a struggling team. And I think I'm always a little bit more likely to kind of pick somebody like that. But also, the defensive assignments that he takes and stuff like that, I think he's deserving of a spot as well.
A quick question for Nikias goes, who's shown you more this year, Okoro or Williams?
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you were asking Nikias when you said that. I think probably Williams from like a ball handling standpoint. Okoro, I think I trust Okoro. If I had to like pick one of those two, 3 years from now, who do you need to get you a stop, and who do you trust? Like, I think the idea of kind of where he's at within Cleveland's development, I think there's a greater likelihood that he'll be like a key piece of what they're doing more so than Williams. I think the Bulls, it'll be really interesting to see what the Bulls do this offseason, for instance, just because of the gamble that they just made at the trade deadline. And so I trust that Williams will obviously be a part of what they're doing, but I would, if I had to put money on like which team will be more likely to invest more heavily in one guy versus the other, I would probably go with Cleveland and Okoro. But I don't even know if I answered your question with that.
No, you did.
It would almost be two ways. I think Williams' offense and his, to some extent, creation and kind of what he can do as a passer, but Okoro's defense.
That's about where I'm at. So I was just curious to see, because I like what Pat Williams has done. Hopefully they give him a little bit more room to grow offensively.
Exactly.
And I like what Okoro has done defensively. And he's shown late in the season, hey, there's some offense in the back pocket too, but obviously he's got to get that consistency to kind of fill that role.
Yeah. He had that big game a couple weeks ago, didn't he? For whatever it was. He went out for 30 or something like that?
Something like that. I was shocked when I saw the box score.
Right. Yeah. So you just hope it's a sign of things to come. That's been one of the cool things about the season, as weird as it's been in between that. And I mean, Porter had a 50-point game a couple weeks ago in Houston. It's been a weird year. And I don't, it's so hard to track what exactly is happening with the rookies anyway. And does this mean anything? Kobe White went off crazy, second half of last year. And people thought, it was a sign of what was going to happen this year. And it's so hard to tell. It's such a crapshoot. I don't know. I would never want the responsibility to have to do this stuff and have to analyze this stuff to where, my head's going to end up on a platter if a guy doesn't pan out, because I would fall too in love with the guys that I draft.
Gotcha. I guess I'll go hipster with my second team. I also have Emmanuel quickly on my squad. I have Sadiq Bey. I have Desmond Bain. Kind of surprised neither one of you had Chuma or Kiki. Really like what he's done in Orlando. Steve, what's the face for? What's up?
I know who the last person is, but continue. Go ahead.
Well, the last player I have, it's not Xavier Tillman.
Oh, wow. I lost. My bad.
He was my top honorable mention for what it's worth, so you're not that far off. I went Jaden McDaniels. He shouldn't be that good at defense already. He can already shoot. He has flash and ball skills. Like, he was one of the top high school recruits in the country for a reason. Didn't pan out that way, especially at his long year, I think, Washington. But dude is talented. I love watching him swarm around on defense as someone that watches an ungodly amount of Timberwolves games, as we've fleshed out on the pod quite a few times. He's been a joy to watch. So I would have him. And again, Okiki's been very good. I just didn't expect this from him at all. I didn't know what to expect from him since he technically missed his rookie year last year. But love where he is defensively. I love the ball skills. Him and Wendell Carter Jr. are already developing chemistry in pick and rolls and dribble handoffs. As the shot continues to come, I think he's going to be an all-around weapon for Orlando. So that is where I'm at my second team.
Okay. Real quick before we move on, you got to put that comment. I picked Campazzo for the rookie team. You got to put that on the screen. So, no, it's not anti-Campazzo podcast.
You were the one guy that gave Facu a spot.
I'm booing the fans now.
I have him. I have honorable mentions listed here, and I have him as an honorable mention. I kind of also feel like, with guys that are older that have played elsewhere before. Not to say that you should, it doesn't fundamentally matter for an all-rookie team, but for guys that are younger that probably care about it a lot more, I tend to lean that way too. I covered Pablo Prigioni when he was with the Knicks as a 35-year-old rookie. He was solid. I mean, he was actually really, really good. Took care of the ball, never turned it over really. I don't vote for awards in real life. This is just a thought exercise for me. But same thing there. I wouldn't have picked him for that team. Easily could have. With Facu, you could make the argument that because of everything with Murray and the fact that he's played more, like Steve said, that he's a pest, you could easily pick him. For me, for someone that's likely to improve a lot more as a 20-year-old, I kind of think it's more appropriate to pick someone that's younger. Not that I care. I really don't care. I don't mind the stick pick him. He was like second or third on my honorable mention list or whatever.
Fair enough. Quick listener question before we move on to the all-NBA teams and we really have some fun. How far off was Peyton Pritchard for y'all for the list? He would have been on my all-rookie third team if there was one. But
exactly.
One,
yeah, so. Same thing.
Yeah, he would have been third. He was behind Cole Anthony. Cole Anthony, Patrick Williams were my little grab bag. I couldn't give it to young Peyton, but he's had a heck of a year.
McDaniels was next on my list. I actually, when I first wrote it out before we hopped on, I realized like last second I didn't have Quickly on there by accident, and so McDaniels was the guy I had to cross off. So he was next on my list. Pritchard would have been somewhere on that third team. Paco would have been somewhere on that third team too.
All right, there we go. And we moved to All NBA, which I feel like we're finally going to have. I think we're going to have more differences on these teams than anything. First and foremost, before we even get started, can we talk about how ridiculous it is that Jokic and Embiid could be listed as forwards?
I think it's great.
Why are we even doing guard, forward, center when the All-Star voting is 2 backcourt, 3 front court? Like, we should at least be there, if not just positionless altogether.
They just need to make it positionless because I don't quite know what they're doing anymore, but they're opening like a really weird can of worms. What I start to think about is like, I can't necessarily think of what the reason was this year for that, other than the fact that I think a lot of people would say that Jokic and Embiid are the 2 best players this year. And so if that's the case, we don't want you to kind of put one guy second team when he's the second best player in the league, which I get that concern, but that will happen in other cases too. Maybe it won't. I don't know. It's been 20 years since you've had a center win MVP, and so maybe they just weren't kind of contemplating that you'd have 2 guys that would happen to be the 2 best players in the league be centers. But it's just weird. I don't like it just because I kind of feel like you could theoretically change that whenever you potentially really want to have someone voted for. And I don't like that the league is kind of meddling with that, if you can use that word.
Interesting part. I think it's a good hack, but I think depending on which way you go, if you vote them both as centers, then you're probably adding another guard in. If you vote them both in on the first team, that forces another big in. So it's kind of interesting. That was kind of my thought exercise. I did it both ways.
I did too.
I wasn't excited about either way, but I did it both ways just to see what it would look like.
Like, I'm sorry, I couldn't get there. Like, Jokic is a center and Beats is a center,
right?
And if that's the ballot we have, like, I mean, if that's what the teams are, then I can't. Like, come on, man.
No, you're totally right, because I did what Steve did, where I had 2 separate lists that I made, and my first list just ended up being silly by putting Embiid and Jokic on the same squad. It's weird because I don't know that you have 3 really, really, really deserving centers, but you've got like 19 really, really deserving forwards and like 28 really, really deserving guards. And so if anything, I would much rather have 3 deserving centers and put them on the 3 teams and then have at least 1 more spot available for the guards and forwards. So I went with that. I ended up going with the way that I assumed the guys did as well.
All right, so I'll lob it to you, Chris, since you're our guest. Do you want to just list your 3 teams, or do you want to go around table with first team, second team, then third team?
Oh, we got to go first team, second team, third team. I cut them off, but we got to do that. Come on.
Damn. No, I'm fine with that. I would have preferred that too. That's fine. Okay, you want me to start?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. So I think it's obvious that, and I've been pretty open about this, Jokic is going to be MVP for me. Jumping the gun with one of the other awards I guess we'll have later. But, I think it's clear that he's either the best, second best player on everybody's thought process. So he's my center for the first team. For the other 4 spots, I went with Curry. I went with Luka. I went with Giannis, and I went with Kawhi, which is kind of weird. Like, he was the guy that kind of lost. He was the guy that benefited, I guess you would say, from not having Embiid on my first team. When I did it both ways, I had Embiid there. Kawhi falls to the second team. By not putting Embiid there, Kawhi makes the first team. So that was my first team.
All right, Steve, who you got?
So I went the controversial way. I stuck with mine. So I went Jokic and Embiid on the first team because go ahead. Come on, bring it on. That's the one question I cannot stand answering this year. I went Giannis first team as well. I just think his growth, if he's going to start taking those jumpers, those post fadeaways, that's big. I went Steph Curry, and then I went Damian Lillard first team.
Okay.
I had him there midseason. I stuck with him there. I think just the coverages he's having to face and the productions he's giving, facing that every night. It's tough between Steph, Dame, and Luka, but I took Dame.
All right, fair enough. I also went Steph at guard. Don't need to go too deep into why he's on the first team. I also went Dame at guard. I have Luka as a forward since he actually defends forwards. Like I'm fine with him using forward as a secondary on the ballot as opposed to either Embiid or Jokic. But anyway, whatever. Luka's a forward for me. Giannis is a forward for me, and Jokic is on my first team because he's the MVP.
Gotcha. Okay.
All right, Chris, who do you have second team?
So I guess I'll start with this since you guys both had Lillard on your first team. He was on my second team and was a pretty easy choice there. And from there, man, my second team is going to be kind of controversial. Obviously, I had Embiid based on what we were saying. So he's on my second team. From there, I went with Chris Paul as my second team guard. I went with Tatum as my forward. Not necessarily in any order. I also had Julius Randle as another forward on that second team. So the second team, I could imagine, is probably going to be a lot different from y'all's, even aside from the fact that you had Lillard on your first team. I'm sure you guys probably have at least one or two picks within that. They'll probably be a little different than what I had.
That's interesting. Steve, who do you have second team?
Well, I was going to ask real quick, what's been the biggest part of Jason Tatum's growth this year that you've walked away impressed by?
I think he's kind of answered the call a little bit more defensively, in a way that I used to not think that much of his defense. You could see the potential there just because of the size. Also, a lot was being asked of him at times, at least because of how much of a step back, at least at first, that Kemba had taken. You factor in that obviously Jaylen Brown had taken a step forward, and I think you were the one that had mentioned him earlier as someone that was one of the most improved guys for you. That ends up being a big toll on a team that not just that, but also Gordon Hayward and losing him, just a lot of responsibility for him in a way that watching him do it. And if I'm hypocritical about anything, I was saying before, well, you can't reward a coach for a team that struggles in the first half and then is really good in the second half because he coached the whole season. Tatum can be a really slow starter, but he can really pick it up down the stretch. I just think every team is completely terrified of the guy. Watching that 60-point game a couple weeks ago was pretty mind-blowing. But to answer just your basic question, I thought defensively he was a lot better than he had been in the past, and I think that there was a lot more being asked of him, a lot more being asked of Brown, but I still think it was pretty clear he was kind of their alpha dog. And not to mention that he was a guy that had to do this after getting the virus and still was having, in my opinion, an improved season above and beyond what he'd done the last couple of years in a year where you probably shouldn't have expected that from him given that he'd been sick.
Fair enough. Steve, the floor is yours still.
Second team for me is going to be Luka, and then I went left. I kept James Harden up there.
Wow.
Man was playing too well. Like he was in the MVP talk before he got hurt. So I'm keeping him up there second team. I kept LeBron on the second team. So I'm going full musty old man first take, I know, but they played too well for me to keep them off. I have Kawhi second team, and then I have Rudy Gobert.
Okay.
As the second team center.
All right. So
you have four. You're going to have used four centers by the time it's all over because of the Embiid thing.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, fair enough. So are you going to have Kevin Durant on your third team just to spoil it? Since games played just doesn't matter.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking too.
No, Kevin Durant's not on my third team.
So no Durant, but you have Harden.
Yeah.
Okay.
There's a big difference, though, in games played between those two, right? Like at least 10, 12 games, right?
Yeah, James Harden played a whole stretch without KD.
Fair enough. I was just curious.
I was trying to figure out as I was doing this vote, I'm like, do we count those 8 games that Harden played in Houston? Because if you don't, he only played half the season. I think if you took those away, he would have like 34 games, maybe 35. And like, if we count them, like they should be counting as a demerit almost. He was rough. And the effort. Anyway, neither here nor there. But I did think about that a little bit.
All right. Well, my team is definitely going to be a little bit different then. My second team guards, I have Chris Paul. I also have Paul George, who has been freaking incredible this year on both ends of the floor. I have Kawhi. I have Jimmy Butler on my second team. who has been one of the most impactful defenders in the sport when he's been available. I think Miami is 31-19 in the games that Butler has played, so he's brought that value. Just to briefly touch on, I was giving you a little bit of a hard time for having Harden on your team. Like generally, when we had an all defensive team episode, we kind of went over that, and my general rule there was like 70% of games was kind of my arbitrary cutoff. So with that, I wasn't going to have Harden. I was going to have LeBron. We're not going to have KD. I have Embiid on my second team. He's technically played like 71% of games for Philly right now. I think he needs to play one more before the season ends to end the season at that mark. I think he's at 49 games, needs 50 for me. So Embiid is there for now. But that would be my second team. Paul, PG, Kawhi, Jimmy Butler, and Joel Embiid.
Okay.
Chris, who do you have for third?
Third team was interesting too, but I think we're not in lockstep with everything. But I think what you'll find is that most of these guys we all have on one of our teams, which says something, I think. So I'll start with probably the one that is, will be the biggest lightning rod, probably to you all or to maybe the people that are watching. I put Beal on my third team, which it's crazy because it shouldn't require that much of an explanation, given that the guy up until a day or two ago, and still might be, depending on, if Steph has a horrible game or something, still could win the scoring crown, and I think for me, one of the other things I'm considering is like, okay, similar, maybe I was just a White Sox fan for too long where they kind of sucked and every team was basically supposed to get an all-star, and I would get mad when my team didn't get an all-star. I don't feel a responsibility, but if things are kind of even and it's between a team that has three guys that could get a spot and a team where, they're in playoff contention and, should we at least give them like one representative? I don't really care about that, but if it's that even and if it's between one guy that's kind of doing the majority of the dirty work and a guy that is kind of splitting a lot of that dirty work, I chose Beal, and I feel like for me it was very clearly going to be either Beal or Paul George, and so I picked Beal. Paul George, who could easily pick, pained me to leave him off the team, but I went with Beal. I went with Harden as well for the exact same reason that Steve mentioned. I didn't see him being on my second team, but I did put him on my third team because that dude was an MVP candidate, or at least could have been, should have been. Like, he was carrying Brooklyn. I did want to subtract his 8 games from Houston because he was, that was bad. But that dude was a killer this season, and I think he probably does deserve a spot. It's very clear that you could have him in that conversation. He was balling out. I had Butler on my third team. He was another guy that I kind of felt like between him and George, I was contemplating them both and thinking, well, Butler seems like kind of more of a driver of his team's success, and I think is a little bit more deserving than PG. And even though Jimmy had missed a bunch of time at the beginning of the season, all of a sudden you look up, they basically played the same number of games this year, which for some reason in my mind that didn't compute until I looked at it and noticed it. So I went with Jimmy there. I did pick LeBron. I was kind of on the fence about that for the same reason that, with Harden and all these other guys that have missed time, but another guy that was a legitimate MVP candidate. And I went with Gobert. I think Gobert should be in the conversation for MVP. Top of the conversation, hell no, but in the conversation, I think he should be there. I think if you did put Embiid on your first team along with Jokic, then Gobert easily could have been second, and I wouldn't have argued with anybody that did that. He's having like an all-time defensive season in my opinion.
Yeah, fair enough. Steve, who do you have on your third team?
Chris Paul, Jimmy Butler, and then I have Tatum and Randall on my third. Now, because I did 2 bigs on the first team, that forced me to go with Bam Adebayo as my center on the third team.
Yep.
So that was the quandary there, because it's probably going to be Bradley Beal, but I had to go Bam.
All right, fair enough. I also have Rudy Gobert on my third team. I have Julius Randle on my third team. I have Bam on my third team. My 2 guards are going to differ from yours, apparently. I have Devin Booker on the third team. I think he's had a tremendous season. just like Chris Paul has been able to kind of dictate things without Booker on the floor, Booker's been able to do the same thing. He's shown some growth defensively. He also can score on all three levels. So doing that for the second seed in the West right now, exceeding expectations. I think Booker deserves a spot. And my other guard is Trae Young. And I am not sure why Trae Young is not getting more love in these kind of discussions.
Yeah. He's on I have a list of snubs about 10 people long, and he's like second or third on that list for me. I had PG first. I had Zion right behind that, which I don't even know if it's in order looking at that because I don't think Zion's the next most deserving guy. I did consider Zion, though, when I did it the other way and I would have had 4 centers, I considered throwing Zion into that last spot as a center, which wouldn't have really made sense either, but that's why I didn't do it. Trae deserves, that's the way I was thinking, though. I figured I probably wasn't going to make room for Butler and Bam. I did consider Bam a little bit for maybe that last center spot as well. But it was weird to me to have Butler on the team and to not have Trae on the team, or to really, I've read around to some other people's opinions. I'm not even really seeing Trae brought up in the conversation, and it's a little strange to me. I think that he certainly deserves to be in the conversation. The guys that I felt like were borderline to me, that I had to leave a guy out here, put a guy in here, were mostly guys that are extremely great two-way players. Jimmy, we talked about Paul George, and the idea that you look at other guys, Jaylen Brown, I think you could at least mention. Simmons, you could at least mention. I think that was where I struggled with Trae a little bit, is that defensive part is always going to be a question for me. But offensively, man, you're not going to find too many people that are doing more for their team, particularly in a year where everybody was banged up and Trae had to do a lot of it himself. Or if he wasn't doing that he was creating a whole hell of a lot for a guy that was just sitting under the basket and dunking everything home.
No Kyrie.
Kyrie was right there. I'll show you my list here. Kyrie was in my top 3 guys that I didn't put on the team. I actually had Kyrie. I don't know if you can see it here. I had a little cross out. Kyrie was there, and then I took him out so that I could make room for, who was it? I think Butler. I decided, since I had Harden on the team, I was like, well, I'm not going to put 2 or 3 nets on the team when all those guys have been banged up. But I'll put a guy that was kind of driving his team's success. So I put Butler and took Kyrie off, so I wouldn't have 2 nets there.
Okay, so Steve, was that the biggest reason you made the face when I brought up Trae Young, because you thought Kyrie has been better?
I think Kyrie's been pretty good. I thought it was pretty easy for you. Didn't have Beal on there either, did you?
I did not have Beal, no.
I mean, I have Beal over Trae Young right now, unfortunately. So it's interesting. I mean, they're all really good guards, so it's hard, especially in the guard room, to choose between 6 of them basically. But Trae Young kind of threw me for a little bit of a loop. He's been a lot better though.
You could have 4 all NBA teams, and it would still be really hard with some of these guards and wings. It's just brutal. And he's kind enough not to mention it on the pod, but man, Nikias and I have talked for the last week about me being on tonight, and he told me that loosely that we were going to talk about awards, and I guess I must have asked him a couple hours ago. I'm like, just a quick question: are we doing all NBA too or no? He was like, yeah, and I was like, because I don't vote, so I'm fortunate to not have to not worry about the stuff and the trolls and everybody that comes after you, but it's really difficult. I think the cool thing is that the 3 of us clearly watch a lot of the games, so we're vested in it. I think we care a lot about the picks and have thoughts that go in each pick and probably study a little bit more closely than other people do. But I don't envy having to come up with these lists. I really absolutely hate that a lot of the incentives and the contracts are based on it. It's really not anything we have to do with. It's not anything that anybody kind of thought about when that process was handed over, or was incentivized that way. It's just kind of in the CBA, but it sucks because, one, you've got the league kind of saying, well, you can put 2 centers on your first team, but at the same time, it's like you've got to try to find 15 spots, define 15 spots for 30 guys that might be deserving. And even if you had 5 teams, I feel like it would be kind of difficult, let alone 3.
Absolutely. This is arguably the deepest talent pool the league has had So like I'm just to your point about us watching a bunch of games and being invested in, like I'm blessed to be able to watch all of this talent all the time.
Yeah.
Just as a general note, like it's a lot of fun. It doesn't make me feel good taking. I mean, I'm confident in the trade pick again, like 26-9 or whatever he's averaging, plus point differential when he's on the floor. He's been able to do so without having like a star tier second creator. Even though Kyrie has played a lot by himself, he's also had a lot of playing time with KD. He's had some playing time with James Harden. Like Trae Young's best secondary creator is it Bogdan? Is it Gallo? After the first 2 or 3 months or whatever it was. So I think what he's been able to do for a Hawks team that has home court advantage right now, like I think he deserves a lot of credit for what he's been able to do.
You flipped quite a switch on Trae Young. Also, that was Kevin Huerter disrespect.
I mean, even then, if Kevin Huerter is your James Harden, then I think I've made my case.
What's the next part? Kevin Huerter is your James Harden. You said that out loud. All right, man.
I'm just saying. But yeah, just go back over my third team again. I had Trey, Booker, Bam, Randall, and Gobert. So that is that. Just to pull the curtain back a little bit, I did send both of these gentlemen an email, just kind of detail what we wanted to go over. I am now realizing, looking at the email and looking at my notes, that I did not put all defensive on the list.
I have mine.
Okay, Chris, do you have all defensive teams?
I did not make out an all defensive team because I did not see it on the list. I have a defensive player of the year group if we want to go over that, but you guys can go over it. I don't necessarily need to.
Okay, we could bounce on all defensive teams real quick. I'll let you go first, Steve.
I had a tough time with the first team, but I had Rudy Gobert. I had Bam just because of the defensive versatility, guard 1 through 5, guard anyone, help. He was great. I put Draymond on the first team just because of how important he is to the Golden State defense and his ability to switch and cause havoc on the weak side. Ben Simmons was on my first team, and then I had Drew Holiday. I think Drew Holiday gets slept on defensively, so that's my first team.
All right, fair enough. My first team, the games played just kind of barely made my cutoff, but just from what I've seen from him, Fred VanVleet's still on my first team. Just incredible what he does at the point of attack and also what he does as a help defender. Just one of the best dig and recover guys in the league. Can still guard up just because of how strong he is, the way he can draw charges. Keeping him on my first team. Ben Simmons is there. I have Jimmy Butler there, who might just be just wrote about it last week. He might just be the best off-ball defender in the league. Just incredible, like split in two. Bam is on the team as well. His versatility unlocks everything Miami wants to do. If they want to switch, if they want to trap, if they want to play drop, he can do all of that. And Rudy Gobert, who just, I guess, to spoil a little bit, he is my defensive player of the year right now. So he's obviously on the first team for me.
What happened to Mikal? What happened to Mikal Bridges?
He is on my second team, but I will let you give your second team first.
He was on your first team earlier. Anyways, my second team, I have Marcus Smart. I still think his activity on ball, I think the havoc he can create deserves credit. I have DeJounte Murray on my second team. I think he's been underrated with his on-ball defense. I know San Antonio hasn't been great defensively, but he's had some impactful plays. I have Bridges as well on my second team. Jimmy Butler was the toughest one to leave off my first team just because of his impact, but he's on my second team. I mean, if you want to talk about help defense, you want to talk about impact for a team, he's right up there. And then Joel Embiid was my big for the second team.
All right. So second team for me, I have Drew Holiday. I have Mikal Bridges. I have Draymond Green at forward for all the reasons that you mentioned for him on the first team. I still have Giannis, who isn't just purely in that weak side role like he was last year, of a lot more switching, still providing crazy rim protection, still a good ISO defender, can still swat shots on the weak side when they do play drop. So he's still up there for me. And my second team center was Clint Capella, who has sneakily been one of the best rim protectors in the league, a linchpin of Atlanta's defense when he's on the court, and they feel it when he's not out there. There's a very drastic drop when he's not on the court. Yeah. So I wanted to give another Hawks some love. Capella's been fantastic. Embiid has also been very good. Miles Turner's also been very good, but I think Capella deserves a nod.
I agree. I have him on my defensive player of the year list. Pretty high up, not quite top three, but I basically have him tied with Bam in my top three. more or less. So I guess fourth, but and it's funny because I like wrote down a list of why, and the first thing I said is damn, because Atlanta's trash when he's not there. it's just, I mean, it's the thing I'm most worried about for them in the postseason is like they look legitimate enough defensively, but that is so heavily dependent on whether he's there or not. And if he's not, then yeah, it could get bad very quickly.
Where are you two on Matisse Thybulle? Like, this, is it just the role? I mean, would you have him on a team? Let's start there, Chris.
On an all defensive team?
Yes.
I really wish I had thought to write this out. I don't know why I assumed the email that we'd only talk about that. I'm not quite sure I would have him on the team. It would be close. He certainly would have been probably, if not one of the top 10 guys I had there, top 12, top 13. I think he's in the conversation pretty easily. I remember getting a lot of flack from Knicks fans last year for not having RJ Barrett on my all-rookie teams and having Thybulle instead, and my justification being that he was like a generationally fantastic defender. So I think the world of him defensively. I think if he was not on one of my two teams, like I said, I didn't draw it out, but he'd be easily in the top 12, 13. And I feel like within that, I could have seen coming around on that. I'll put it this way. I think we'll talk about it more just with the defensive player of the year conversation. But one thing that I was really kind of struck by is a number I guess I hadn't noticed that I came across just in doing some research before our conversation. So, one of the things that people were using to kind of knock Embiid's MVP talk at a certain point, mostly people that were rooting for Jokic or were making an argument for Jokic, was that, okay, you're going to talk about how much better Embiid is defensively than Jokic. Well, can you really claim that to be his value when the Sixers are number one in defense in the league during the stretch that Embiid is out? So, I mean, that, we've certainly heard that. Maybe other people that are listening have heard that. The thing that I thought was really interesting, I went back and looked at the statistics from that run, and the Sixers were second worst in the league at the rim on defense, despite being number one in the league on defense during that same stretch. They were awful at protecting the rim while Embiid was out, which kind of makes sense. But that also speaks to how ridiculous they had to have been on the perimeter if they were that bad at the rim, which speaks to, I think, Simmons and Thybulle. So, he's really, 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 really good. And I think what excites me about it is like he's really, really, really young still. And, just the idea that guys, I always get excited about guys that can defend at such a young age. It's the same reason I'm kind of a believer in Ntilikina as much as he's shown that maybe, certain offensive tasks and roles are just too big for him. Okay, fine. But like, show me someone that can defend like that at his age. Right. And Thybulle, I know, is a little bit older, but show me more than like one or two guys that can defend like that at his age. Not just now, but like over the last 5, 10, 15 years.
I feel that. Just as a quick note, again, I kind of have that 70% of games /50 game cutoff. OG Anunoby came in, I think, is at 43 games, and I'm assuming he's going to be done for the year since Toronto's just kind of punting. If he played 50 games, he's on my first team. Like, I probably just drop Fred, the second team, move Jimmy Butler over the guard just so I can fit OG in at forward. Like, as a guy that can legitimately defend all 5 positions and do so at a high level, he absolutely deserves a nod if he would have been healthy enough to make one. So I just want to throw that out there. Oh, man. All right. Well, I guess while we're on defense, let's go to Defensive Player of the Year. Steve, who do you have as your top 3?
My top 3 from bottom to top. I have Bam third. I have Rudy Gobert second. And I have Ben Simmons first.
Wow.
I went back and forth, but just the ability to guard all of those positions, to have that impact on the game. When you have a player who can, let's say your team has 2 or 3 guys who can get it going, you could put Ben on any of them and feel good about where you're going. So I respect the defensive ability. I respect the ability to guard multiple positions. I think that impact is too big. So I'm going to go with him.
Interesting.
Yeah, fair enough. Chris, who do you have?
I had the same thing, except Ben and Gobert flipped. I go back and forth on that, with how, it's kind of one of those almost, age-old questions, like, would you rather have someone that does everything and can do everything, or the guy that's just really, really, really elite at, one main thing? I would say this. I think Gobert, I'll put it this way. I think if we were talking about like Simmons and Miles Turner, or someone that was like slightly better than Miles Turner defensively, I would feel the way Steve does. Because more often than not, you see Turner doing a lot of stuff at the rim. I think what impressed me, maybe just more because I was making more of a point to watch him and just watch defensive possessions where I'm only looking at him, regardless of where the ball is. It just kind of feels like Gobert's gotten more and more and more comfortable getting further out, and just walling guys off and kind of daring guys to, even when he's trying to play the two-man game defensively, that he can get into a passing lane, that he can get back and obviously defend the rim. I was reading a piece that Ben Dowsett wrote today for 538 about how he has, among the 39 guys that have closed out, the bigs that have closed out on like 150 jumpers or 250 jumpers, that he basically has the best percentage, or at least the teams are shooting the worst percentage against him on those shots, on those jump shots. And so he's affecting so much more than just the stuff at the rim, which obviously he's known for. And that doesn't even really account for the stuff that he kind of stops guys from even wanting to shoot at the rim because of who he is. But Simmons, the versatility is why I think he's even in the conversation. He has the ability to kind of shut guys down. I'll be straight up about the fact that I was researching for this, last day or two, and my friend Tyler Tynes over at GQ did a sit down with Ben Simmons and kind of, and Tyler is a big Sixers fan, so he asked him some pretty good pointed questions. He said, I've been reading lately that you've been saying more and more that you're the defensive player of the year. Why do you keep saying that? And he was like, because I am. And because, nobody does what I do. And yeah, I know there's advanced numbers. I know there's this, I know there's that, but like nobody does what I do. And, like, for instance, we played Brooklyn and, I'm thinking I'm going to guard KD. KD's out. Okay, you got to guard Kyrie. No one else can do that. And Tyler Tynes hit him with the greatest follow-up of all time. He said, yeah, but didn't Kyrie have 37, though? And I was like on the floor because you're also reading a Q&A, and I'm like, golly, that's like a hard-hitting question. Like, and Ben Simmons is like, yeah, but we won, though. And does that matter? No, but it made me crack up, and I was also like, wow. It doesn't take away from the fact that everybody takes their lumps. I know that Gobert got lit up for, what was it? Did Jokic have 47 on him at one point? Like 47
all the time. Every time he sees him.
Yeah, I mean, he gives the dude like a 40 piece every time. I think he got him the last time, if I remember, that Gobert beat him last time. But yeah, I mean, so everybody takes their lumps, but I do think there is something to the fact of like this versatility, the idea that you're so versatile that sometimes like maybe it is better to just have a specialty every now and then and to just have a system. I don't know. I could be sold either way, but I do think that Gobert is a little bit more like he's the system and he's a rim protector, but he does more than that too. And, we kind of really zoom in on this whole versatility thing with Ben Simmons, but I don't think we need to be boxing in Gobert either because it's not like he can only do one thing. So I would pick Gobert. Understand the Simmons pick. It's not the way I would go, but I think sometimes we almost overvalue the versatility when we're talking about just like which is more valuable for this sort of award. So and he plays in a system where he's got other really good defenders with him. We just talked about Thibault. We just talked about Embiid and how dominant they can be when those two guys are there as well. So I see it both ways, but I tend to lean Gobert.
Got you. I also have Gobert at the top of my list. I have Gobert, I have Simmons 2, and I have Bam 3. It's kind of weird for me. Like, I do think Gobert has just been the most impactful defender in the NBA. Like, he is the best drop defender on earth. And the fact that he has improved to the point to where he can switch sometimes, it's not a thing you want him to do primarily. But like late in the clock, he can slide for a couple of dribbles. He can play up to the level of the screen or like a step below the level of the screen now instead of just a pure drop. I think just that little bit of growth, I think that obviously helps. I feel like the plate off the floor thing is kind of overblown for him, which I think that's why Gobert gets some flack for winning the award, because you look at what he does in the regular season and he doesn't have the same impact in the postseason, but it feels like people kind of go too far on what happens in the postseason. That's just a whole weird dichotomy to work through. But I also struggle with this because while I think Gobert has been the most impactful guy, he should win the award. Like, I generally value the Ben Simmons types. Like, I value the Bam types. I value the OG types who can kind of switch everywhere and do a good job wherever you put them, versus a guy who, again, Gobert is a little bit better in space than he has been the last couple of years, but he's still not a switch big, period.
Sure.
And like, not having that type of versatility that you can count on is inherently less valuable to me, but he's so freaking good at what he's good at. Yeah. And it's just kind of hard to deny him.
This is 1000% correct. I'm gonna play a little contrarian role, because I've said it before, Rudy has gotten a lot better at being active in pick and roll, get up in space, contesting, being more active on the weak side, because you used to be able to take him off the ball and hope that he would make a mistake on the weak side rotating. What's his weakness? What's his flaw?
What is Gobert's flaw?
Yeah.
Like, I don't think Utah can ever play just a switch everything scheme with him. Because I do think he's going to struggle against like the quickest of guards if he has to do so consistently.
Do you have any concern that the thing that he's great at, you can't really do in the playoffs?
I have concern about that. I actually mentioned it really briefly, mostly because I didn't want people yelling at me for something that was just like a story that I was just trying to write and get out the door. If Utah and Phoenix have to play, I'm really, really, really interested to see what happens with Chris Paul and Devin Booker's willingness to just take mid-range jumpers all day long. Super interested to watch that against a team like Utah if it happens, because that's what Utah wants you to take, but you can't give them that shot. And we've watched Utah struggle with that before. Gobert struggled with that before when Chris Paul lit them up for 40 once in that same sort of situation, because he's so willing to take that shot and wants to take that shot. If you're going to give it to him, it's free money for him. So I am interested to see that. I don't think it plays a role in an award choice. I don't think it should. I don't think it matters enough, because generally speaking, if you can convince guys to take mid-range jumper in the regular season, that's good. Mm-hmm. But I am really interested it is interesting, because I think at a certain point, similar to the way we've kind of gotten with Giannis, I think it's a little different for MVP, but at a certain point, people kind of want to see you prove it. And will they take that stance with the Defensive Player of the Year? Probably not, but it will be interesting if Utah kind of falters and there's kind of a hole in their defense, so to speak, in the playoffs. What that means for someone being called like the best defender of his generation, potentially if he wins another one or two of these. I think he's have to start considering that. But if it leaves a wide open flaw for the playoffs, it's kind of interesting.
No, and Rudy Gobert probably is a Defensive Player of the Year. I picked Simmons, but I get where you go with Rudy. But I have an issue when we talk so much about his impact. But if I'm a Damian Lillard, CJ McCollum, I want to play Rudy Gobert because I know what shot I'm going to get.
Sure.
Mm-hmm.
So that back and forth is where I'm like, I understand how good Rudy is, but if I'm a guard, please come out here, big fella.
That's fair. And like, this is why, like, in a vacuum, I would rather, if I just want a really great defender at the 5, like, I would prefer to have a Bam Adebayo more so than Rudy Gobert, because I can do more things. Like, there aren't going to be built-in shots when Bam is your 5, because he can operate in the drop if you don't have an elite pull-up threat. He can switch if you just want to keep things in front. He can trap if you want to get the ball out of his hands. You can't do all that with Rudy. But since this is a regular season award and you can get away with drop a lot easier in the regular season, and Rudy's the best drop defender alive, and he is the linchpin of what Utah wants to do defensively, like, it's kind of hard to build a super strong case against them for the award.
Oh, no. I just like to poke holes. I like to be contrarian. I like to be different.
Steve, you picked Bam as your third guy for that award? Okay, so I think all three of us did. Okay, that's interesting.
Well, that's the funny part about Bam, because as much of an impact as he has, you can just switch him off. Because he's a switch guy, he's a switch big, you can switch him out of the matchup and have him on the weak side and hope you can, not have him affected or get to drive and kick. So every great defender kind of has their thing that you can move against them. It's probably why it's hard not to like Draymond, like what he does.
Yeah.
I know he's not, but he is, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Like he's not, but he is. Like, and I think that's going to show in the playoffs, which is like kind of a counter Gobert thing. But I like Rudy, man. He's done the things he's supposed to do. He's done the things he needed to get better at. So this is not a bash section. I just wanted to bother Nikias.
Oh man, always welcome to do that on the Dunker Spot podcast. Let's go quick hit with 6 man of the year, and then we'll finish out with MVP. Don't have to go super deep into the 6 man of the year award since we're already running long. Chris, who is your 6 man of the year?
I'll give reverse order real quickly. I put Clarkson at 3. I put Rose at 2, and I put Ingles at number 1.
All right, why Ingles at 1?
I mean, to me, I just think the cart gets put before the horse a lot for some reason with this award. It always tends to be kind of a prototypical guy that just is, a microwave scorer that fills it up, but doesn't do much else. Clarkson would be kind of that guy. Do I think he's done a little bit more this year? Yeah, I think to play for Quinn Snyder, typically you have to play a little bit of defense and you have to do a little bit out, aside from that. I get that, there's been a lot asked of the secondary scorers on that team and some of the injuries they've had. But he had such the same way we talked about Jeremy Grant earlier and how if he stays on this trajectory, this is the guy for this award. There was a whole lot of that with Clarkson too, and had a pretty precipitous drop where he had a solid week or two where he was like shooting in the 20s and the 30s. And it's crazy. It sounds crazy to say that should cost you completely, but look at what Ingles has done though. I mean, he's going to be the most efficient scorer of all time in a lot of regards statistically, playing on the same team, has started a whole lot of games too. I mean, it's interesting because Clarkson probably should have hoped for Ingles to just have to start more games so that he wouldn't be eligible for the award. But to me, it's really not that close between those two. And honestly, if we're looking like at the end of the season, I know Clarkson just had a crazy 41-point game where he had no assists. But this is more or less, you look at his statistics, like this is more or less kind of the season he had last year and the year before that and the year before that, statistically at least. Rose, on the other hand, the reason I put him number 2, I don't think I could quite make a real argument for him to win the award. Part of that was kind of just playing for a team that wasn't playing for much in Detroit to start the season. But the time that he's been with the Knicks, you could make a weird argument. I mean, obviously Randall's their MVP, but after that, it's probably Rose. I mean, I think they've won something like 65% of their games since he's been there. Now, keep in mind, he missed a good chunk of time, maybe 10 games or so, because of the virus that kind of sapped him for a while. Had it not been for that, I mean, you could be having a realistic conversation about the fact that, one, Rose should be in that argument. I probably wouldn't argue that, but you could make an argument. But also, who knows whether the Knicks might have been in better position to potentially challenge for more of a 3 seed rather than a 4. I don't think that would have happened either. But with the clip that they were winning at, and I mean, Rose has been shooting like 50% from mid-range. He's been wildly efficient from 3. His floater has been better. He's actually giving effort on defense. He's making plays on defense. He comes up with a bunch of steals. Never in a million years would I have thought I would make that argument for him, but he's been that impactful to that team, a team that is a winning team. Sometimes I think that there's a little bit of, competition when you've got 2 guys that are on the same team and how the votes break down that way. So I do think he's kind of an intriguing second guy for that race. Anyway, I know you said keep this short. I'm sorry. I'm sitting here rambling. Go ahead.
No, you're fine. Steve, who do you have?
Derrick Rose 3rd, T.J. McConnell 2nd, Jordan Clarkson 1st.
Whoa.
Some T.J. McConnell love. I'm so proud.
I love that kind of ish. That's high.
Well, now what I'd say is I'd like to go with someone who's purely been in that role for majority of the season. So because that's a different animal. Joe Ingles, no disrespect, he's been incredible. I'm not going that route. But to me, he's started too much for me. So Derrick Rose off the bench, he's had to play that role. He's had to captain that second unit. He's had to merge the minutes and the rotations. TJ McConnell's had to carry that team at times as far as playmaking goes. the defense, the steals. And I still go Clarkson because he's had to, while you could say, hey, it's microwave, it's points, it's just scoring, he's had to do that all year.
That's true.
And so that's where I kind of give him those points where you're in that role. You know what you have to do. Other teams know exactly what you're coming in to do every single night, and you're still doing it. Not as high a level as it was in the beginning, so that's why I stick with him. I just think Ingles started too much for me, for my taste.
That's fair.
All right, that's fair. I would ask, don't we have a bit of a precedent with that, with like Lamar Odom, to where he came off the bench but also had to do some spot starting for the Lakers in one of the years that he won 6 Man of the Year? Am I remembering that correctly?
Probably. I'm pretty sure, yes.
So, like, that would be an extra reason. Also, I just think Joe Ingles is just flat out better at basketball than Jordan Clarkson. I think he's had a better year. So, Ingles would be number one for me. I'll say this. I recognize that Jordan Clarkson has been one of the 3 best 6 Man of the Year players. He won't be in my top 3 because I was very annoyed with the award voting last year for 6 Man, where you had Lou Williams and Montrezl Harrell finish in the top 3. And like, just by virtue of math, like one of those guys is a 7th man. Like, you can't have 2 candidates. So like, if I'm picking Ingles as my winner, I'm not going to have Clarkson in. So
At all.
Yeah, but like, again, he's been very good. But like, I just can't logically go there.
What argument did you make last year? Did you have those 2 in your top 3?
I didn't have Lou.
Okay, so by principle, you just don't really believe
like
teammates in that award at all.
Like, 2 guys can't be the 6th man off the bench. Like, it just can't happen. So I do have Ingles at 1. I have Jalen Brunson at 2, and I have TJ McConnell at 3.
Interesting. You guys have McConnell a lot higher than I would have. I had Brunson as my 4th, if that means anything. I really thought he had a great season. Hardaway did too, actually, like kind of surprisingly. I had him and thought about him as my top 5, kind of around there in my top 5 for that. Okay.
I wanted to go Thad, but he started too much for me too. So I went Melo as my 4th.
I didn't know what you were even getting at with that. I was so confused.
I'm not following you up on that. Good for Melo. We'll round things off with MVP. I would assume everyone has Jokic number 1. Is that a fair assumption?
Yeah.
Chris Paul.
Oh, okay.
I'm joking, man.
We tried to get the big man segment back. I see. Okay, if we all have Jokic at 1, who is 2 through 5 on your ballot, Steve?
Joel Embiid is 2. Steph Curry is 3. I got Giannis 4 and Dame 5.
All right, Chris, who do you have?
I went with Steph as my 2nd. Embiid at 3. Giannis at 4. I went with Gobert at 5.
Gobert at 5. That's fun. Okay.
Yeah.
I have Giannis 2. I have Embiid 3. I have Steph 4, and I would have Chris Paul 5.
Okay.
Wait, you got that mad about Chris Paul, and then you put him in your MVP vote?
I said it.
You spent 25 minutes ranting and raving about the conversation about the MVP regarding Chris Paul. Only 3 days later to come on this live stream and say that Chris Paul should be number 5. I'm upset.
I said at the very beginning of the rant that Chris Paul may be 5 on my ballot. I literally said this at the beginning.
We saw you.
Yes, you can pull up. The clip is on my timeline. I literally said he might be 5th. I didn't like the push for number 1. That is way too far. He should be on the ballot.
That was so that whole thing has been so weird. And I'll just say this. The drumbeat where it's like people seemingly like don't want Jokic to have it. I don't think that that's a real thing, but it kind of feels that way. It's weird. Like, I feel like we're watching people move the goalposts, not the people like you and not the Zach Lowe's and stuff like that. So it's not the people that analyze the stuff most closely, but it's just really weird. Like, it's not process of elimination, but if you want to look at it that way, I guess it could be for Jokic. Like, I mean, he was having a great, historically dominant season. And then, a lot of other people that were being considered for it got hurt for like considerable time. but he also very easily could have won it before that. And I was kind of arguing that maybe he should have, even if, all things were equal and none of those guys got hurt. So it's just weird that like it almost felt like we were playing like a random wheel game or something where it's like, Wheel of Fortune. And it's like, you stop on Chris Paul this week. And, granted, he's having a good year, but it's like, since when do we just stop paying attention to like statistics and career arc and all these other things to make an argument for Chris Paul all of a sudden? It's just weird.
Weirdest
I don't know
discussion.
why it was happening. And it's like the only award people can discuss for some reason, like on these networks. It's bizarre. It's just weird.
Well, it's the easiest one to discuss. But I do have one question for you. I'm gonna make it quick, Nikias. No worries. I have a theory with Jokic why he doesn't get some of his flowers. Do you think it's the optics of it? Do you think it's how he gets his buckets that gets viewed as opposed to the fact that he gets his buckets? Because I feel like Jokic doesn't get his respect in that way that he should.
I think this is what's confusing about how people view Jokic to begin with. Because before this season, like he kind of showcased that he can score whenever he wants to when he's aggressive, but then he would just have these halves where he has like 2 points and 5 assists because he's taking 3 shots and a half and Denver's down 8 and everyone's like, what is he doing? So I figured he would get more like mainstream respect this year because he's had on the scorer hat more than ever. And it feels like he's lost respect somehow. So I don't understand what that's about. I guess the aesthetics of it might play a part, but even that's weird because like he's a funky dude. Like I feel like
it's not aesthetic. Like I mean, I don't get it, man. Like if we want to get into aesthetics, man, like we've given James Harden the MVP before, and I feel like he's probably the most divisive player, polarizing player in the league from an aesthetic standpoint. I just don't. I'm missing something, and I don't quite know what it is. I mean, I get that Denver's a smaller market relative to some of the other stuff, and maybe not on TV as much. I do get that he's a kind of slow dude that doesn't really jump much. Mm-hmm. He might be the most brilliant passer in the game. He can score on just about anybody. That jump shot that he takes that like scrapes the top of the sky on off the wrong foot is beautiful. It's funky, it's weird, but I don't get why we want everyone to fit into the same box where their game looks the same. Like people, I was about to use out of respect for the guys, I won't use the B word. People be and moan about not having the 90s style game, and Jokic backs people down for half the game. It's like he's doing exactly what they complain about. I don't get why, like someone was saying, even if you don't like his style of play, I'm like, why would you not like his style of play? He's a dominant big man who passes the ball. Like, for all this stupid talk about unicorns and stuff, like this is probably the closest thing to that. And if you think he doesn't defend enough, okay, fine. Like he's near the league leaders in steals. He's not as horrible as you think defensively. He's probably about average, which is fine. And he's not padding his stats because they play at the slowest pace in the league. Like, okay, when I wrote a piece several weeks ago saying that he was like hands down the MVP, and it was stupid to keep banging this drum. That was the very beginning of April that I wrote the piece. And, I remember at the time Portland was being held in the race by Dame, and so people were arguing him. And they're saying, how can you make this argument? Look at where they are in the standings. They're 5th, they're 6th in the standings, wherever they are in the West. And I was like, okay, they're like a game out of the 4th spot. And their schedule's really favorable compared to Portland's and everybody else's. And they haven't been completely healthy. Murray's been banged up and not playing well. Who knows whether Michael Porter had the virus, because we all know that man's not trying to see a vaccination. Like, he missed 10 games because of that. We've got Jokic out here doing everything by his damn self and putting up almost a triple-double through the first 14 games just to keep them in the race. And then they hit a hot streak. And then Jokic is playing out of his mind. And it's like people are saying, oh, yeah, but he's not. He's in 6th place. It's like, but that would be 3rd place in the East, and you're willing to talk about candidates over there. I feel like people move the goalposts so much, and I get when fans do it, but it's so weird when the media does it, and they're like not paying attention to really basic things, and it makes me think they don't watch, and it makes me mad because he's so much fun to watch. Like, you cannot talk about the NBA and how bad the product is, and then disregard that Jokic is that fun to watch. I don't understand it, and you hear me probably getting worked up. It's weird to me because I enjoy watching the guy so much. It's so weird to me.
It's a bad year to not watch games.
Very true. We got a Chris Herring Big Mad section.
I did. I don't know what that was about. That's the most worked up I've been about anything for a while. I don't know why. I have no idea why.
I bring it out of people. Man.
But it hurts. It hurts the trust in the media to some extent. And I get, ESPN and Fox Sports, they're gonna drive a lot of the conversation, but it's like, I get sometimes where the conversations come with about media playing favorites when you have someone who's dominating stuff that much and all the other guys kind of fall out by process of elimination, and we're still trying to figure out, we're talking about guys that are maybe going to make our second or third All-NBA team, and people are like, they should be in the MVP conversation too. What? Like, how? Why? Like, who, what, why, when, where, how? I don't understand. But it's just a weird, and I feel like this year was a lot stranger than normal about how it happened. I just don't understand where it came from. But hearing each time that Kendrick Perkins and all these other people are coming out of the woodworks with like a new name every week, and I just don't know where it's coming from. It's bizarre, and I feel like it actually starts to kind of eat away at the integrity of what we're doing. When, I mean, I've said this. I think he probably should be a unanimous winner, and I wrote this in my story about him more than a month ago. At the time, he was on pace to win the award, or not the award, but to have a bigger gap in terms of his win shares than anybody else since Steph won it unanimously. And I think he surpassed the gap that Steph won the win shares title by. So it's like, that's where we're at here. And we're sitting here talking about people that maybe will make some second team All-NBA awards. Like, it's just weird. And I think it eats away at what we're doing. When you and me and Steve can sit here for 2 hours and go point by point by point why we're making these choices, and we're not even actually voting. And then you get people that just kind of say something. It hurts what we're doing, and it's frustrating from that point. And it makes me wish sometimes that I did vote, because I at least know that I'm going to put time and thought and effort into what I'm doing, and I'm not just going to react to a couple of games where someone plays really well or their team starts to play really well, and then it's like, well, we've got to pump up Chris Paul because good.
Woo! We have our promo clip. I'm excited about it. Bravo.
I'm not going to get in trouble from somebody.
Well, I guess you can't wait for that Russell Westbrook for MVP push that's coming.
Where's Chandler Jenkins? Because he had like this bit going for like 2 weeks. Now we got to put Facu in the conversation too, because he just drew a charge call. This man was putting everybody in the conversation, and it was cracking me up for 2 weeks with him.
Chandler's my guy, man. That man is hilarious.
He's great. He's so great.
Oh, man, I think that's all of the awards. So with that being the case, Chris, plug yourself. What do you have coming out? What you working on? What's going on?
I have a piece coming out tomorrow on campaign. I think I mentioned that a little while ago. Just because, like I said, I mean, and it was funny because Zach Lowe and I will joke sometimes that we kind of are working on something and then we'll beat each other to the punch. I think he did like his all-star team of his kind of like borderline, like bench all-stars almost, his Luke Walton all-stars. And I think he had a segment on campaign, so he beat me to the punch with some of it. But I'm like floored that a guy that was like this close to being out of the league entirely, seemingly, is like holding down a pretty key spot on a contender. That's just, I can't remember many times where I've seen that happen, like from one year to the next. So I'm writing about him. That'll come out in the morning, hopefully. And but the big thing I'm working on, and I mentioned it, and I'm kicking myself for this. It's my fault because I've talked so much. I never should have been talking this much on the pod. But I have like a laundry list of Hawks fans, including one or two that I see that are on here, that I've been trying to talk to because of this big feature I'm working on. I'm really fascinated by kind of the Hawks and their like long held pursuit to find a star or a superstar. They really haven't had a legitimate one since Neek. I know Joe Johnson was an all-star 74 times, but someone that would draw fans to the seats, and they really struggled for a long time to do that. And I think they're just now on the cusp of doing it. And of course, they're in a pandemic where you can't have a full crowd. So I'm fascinated by that, but I'm also fascinated by all the dynamics of what makes Atlanta as a city interesting and why it's so hard for them to draw fans. Just they're probably third or fourth fiddle in their own city. The racial dynamics that are at play, the hip hop kind of vibe that, is at play there, and the team struggle to draw white fans, which came up in their memos several years ago with their ownership, which was weird. I'm going to get into all that, so it'll be hopefully a good piece. But the mistake I made was that because I wanted to talk to people that have just now become interested in them in the last year, 2 years, I put out a tweet yesterday saying, are there any season ticket holders who have just signed on in the last year or two? Because if there are, I'd love to talk to you for the story. And I got about 30 responses. And I'm trying to talk to all 30, but the stories due like Monday or Tuesday of next week. So I was texting with Nikias earlier. I'm like, yeah, I'm like swamped because I talked to, I think 5 today. I talked to like 6 yesterday, but that means I've got 19 more. So I'm trying to do all that. My book manuscript, everything with my book manuscript, including the revisions, is due Monday as well. So I've got a lot going on that I've got to finish. But I'm really happy that we were able to make this happen because I'm big fans of both of yours. Could not be happier for the success and all the love you guys get online. Just please keep doing what you're doing. You guys are great at it.
Really appreciate it, man. Thank you for taking this much time out of your day with you having so much going on. Again, you have your book going, you have a couple articles you're working on, and we are getting ready to dive into playoff talk like next week. So the real fun is about to start.
Well, thank you for having me, guys. I really do appreciate it.
No problem, man. So that is going to be it for us. You can find me on Twitter at Nikias NBA. You can find Steve Jones Jr. at Steve Jones 20. You can find Chris Herring at Herring_NBA. Please subscribe to the podcast if you haven't already. We're on Apple, Spotify, Google, Stitcher, Podbean, wherever you get your podcast. And with that, we are out of here.